you taking the time to listen to this. I think we got a great cast here tonight. I'm sitting here in Atlanta, Georgia, and we got Jake and David on now, and hopefully Annette will be able to join us in a few moments. Real quick, I know we all care a ton about what's going on in the world, and with Maccabi, the Maccabi, we know we've been punted for 1 year till 2022. We're all hoping and optimistic we're going to put on the best games ever. Thanks, Shifty. Appreciate it. He's made it known where he's sitting right now. Much appreciated. We got a big crowd tonight. I don't want to hold us up, but let's all work together towards putting 22 to an amazing set of games, and I'll speak more to that towards the end of it. Shifty's typing and at the same time. Real quick, we've got David Blue in Los Angeles. He keeps changing his backgrounds from smoke and fog, and currently we've got a scene of a backyard basketball game going on, and Jake Rauchbach, North Carolina tonight, joining us with a scene from his gold medal team in 2017 as part of the open team. I'm not going to spend too much time introducing these two guys. There was a brief bio in the email that got started to get signed up for this, as well as they got some cool stuff to share with y'all. So first, I'd like each of them, just to tell us a little bit about their background in basketball, and as they're leading into it, specifically some involvement with Maccabi USA. Jake, you drew the short straw, so you're up first.
Well, my playing career pales in comparison to David's, but I'll try over here. So I actually played college basketball at Drexel in Philadelphia for Bruiser Flint. Ended up getting into coaching soon after college, and my first stop was Newman University around Philadelphia, and then actually went back to Drexel for a year, went to Temple for 4 years with Coach Fran Dunphy. And then my good friend Steve Graber gave me a call in 2017, April, May-ish 2017. The funny story about this is I just got back from Israel for my first time ever visiting Israel. And he calls me up. He's like, Jake, there's an opening with the men's open team heading to Israel in about 2.5 months. Would you be interested in being an assistant coach? And I was like, absolutely, Steve, that would be amazing. So, the rest was kind of history. I went over there with, I think you can see the background back here. That's the team right there. We had head coach Doug Gottlieb. I was an assistant coach. We had Summer Ranstead. Josh Schachter was an amazing chairman. And 11 players out of the team went on and play professional basketball in Israel. So it was a really great group. So won a gold medal there, and that's Maha in Jerusalem. And then from there, a really cool thing happened. I was offered a couple of jobs to coach in Israel thereafter. Ended up working with Roni Nestiona in the first division there, and then stayed there for a year. And then shortly after that, ended up coaching in Budapest, Hungary, with the men's open team there as the head coach. And this is last summer, 2019. Another unbelievable experience. It's a different experience because it's the European games versus the Israeli games, but it was a blast. It was a blast. We had Adam Chaskin, who's on the line, as our chairman. We had Jeff Wilbren as our assistant coach. Jeff is an associate head coach at Stanford, great guy. So I couldn't have a better support staff there. And we had great players. Ended up going 6-0, I think, and had a great time in Budapest. So, and now I'm coaching at St. Francis as director of integrated player development. So, and then lastly, I guess the co-chairman with Josh Schachter to throw in all the Maccabi experience. And so for the 2022 games, and we just appointed John Shire as a head coach. So we're excited about that. And yeah, it's been a cool journey. Cool journey.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. Much appreciated. And this picture around that I'm showing right now is both our teams. We had a early morning scrimmage one morning, and the open team showed the 18-year-olds who were in charge, of course, but it was another wonderful moment before we broke camp in 2017. David.
Okay.
Let's get a little background. Thank you.
Yeah. Steve, thanks for inviting me to have to be part of the talk here. So my basketball experience starts right here. Actually, the picture here is Venice Beach, the basketball courts on the beach. So this is where I grew up playing here, amongst other street ball courts around LA. And then in the early '90s, when AAU started to take the scene, I started to play, in that realm. By the time I got to high school, I was a pretty good player. Then in 1996, I was invited to play in the JCC games to represent Los Angeles. The games were in Metro West, New Jersey. We went there, we won the gold, we had a good showing. Then after that, I played in the 1997. I was invited to come to training camp to try and make the team for the Maccabi games to represent United States. I made the team, so I went there. I was one of the only other high school kids. I remember, landing in Israel, just really feeling a connection to the country. Even at 16, turning 17, we won the bronze that year. It was a tough loss there to Great Britain, but it was a great experience for me. So then after that, when I came back, I finished high school basketball here in LA with Westchester High School. We were the state champion and city champion, and I was the LA player and the California player of the year. And then I got a scholarship to various schools, but I chose University of Southern California. Wanted to stay in Los Angeles. I really wanted to go to UCLA, but they wanted another player. And so I went to USC, played 4 years there. After my sophomore year, I played in the Maccabi games, the Pan Am games in Mexico City in 1999. So that rounded out the Maccabi games experience for me. And then in 2001, got to the Elite Eight in college and lost to the eventual champion Duke. And then finished my last year, my senior year, the following year. I made Aliyah. So I went to the training camps and tried to make the NBA. Didn't work out. The Spurs and the Heat said they would draft me in the second round, but that didn't happen. So I made Aliyah and I went to go play for Maccabi Tel Aviv. So in 2002, I played for Maccabi Tel Aviv. That was my rookie year. It was okay. And then my second year, I had a great year. We had a great year. We won the European Championship and the Israeli Championship and the Israeli Cup. And then after that, I played Summer League with the Kings. I had a real good Summer League with them, signed a contract, went to training camp, didn't have a great training camp as far as on the court, but really enjoyed my time playing in NBA with Chris Webber and Stojakovic and Mike Bibby and the Kings that were, really good back then. So then after that, I went to Benetton Treviso in Italy, finished out the season there. And then the next 2 years I played in Bologna, Italy. And then after that, back to Maccabi, and then to France, and then back to Maccabi. And then that was a 10-year professional career. I retired in 2012. I went back to USC to get my undergraduate degree in sociology. So I kind of took a sabbatical. So I took like 18 months off. I really didn't find any niche in the basketball industry. So I decided to go back overseas for one more year to play professional basketball again, just to figure out what I was going to do with my life and also to make some more money. So I went back to Israel and we won the championship again with Maccabi Tel Aviv in 2014. And then I retired. And so I've been retired now for 6 years. And I've had different jobs in finance and real estate and insurance and customer service and all, you name it. And I've sort of found a niche in I was coaching teens, high school basketball players, and sort of incorporating interesting like emotional intelligence work and energy work and different things, and some things that made me successful on the court, and also as a lifestyle coach, working with guys one-on-one and small groups and stuff. And that's what I've been doing. And then, now sort of COVID kind of stopped me from going out to give speeches. So now I'm doing Zoom conference calls here.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Much appreciated. So both of you got to Israel, a lot of it through Maccabi, it sounds like, initially, some of your first touches. Can y'all, I'm going to ask David first, David, you played many different countries, France, Italy, you mentioned Israel. Tell us a few things that are unique about playing in Israel, particularly different than other countries, including, maybe the training camps you attended with the Kings and Heat and Spurs.
Yeah. Well, first of all, in Israel, they have what's called the Russian rule. So this was started in Russia, where you have to have two countrymen on the court at all times. So I played as an Israeli because I made Aliyah, so I could play on the court with two Americans at the same time. That rule was not for EuroLeague. That was just in Israel. So that allowed me to play multiple positions. That also sort of fits in with the Israeli style of basketball, which is a lot of like American guys that are like 6'5" to 6'8" that can play one-on-one, perimeter or in the post. And then you can put those three guys around Israeli guards or big men, and just kind of have those guys sort of carry the load there. As far as in other countries, I would say the style of play in Israel is definitely more of a small forward, power forward, one-on-one style game. It can get physical, and it's a lot of fun, and there is probably more trash talking than in some other leagues. Whereas in Spain, it's more of a pick and roll type of game where there's a lot of good guards and big men. And so they try and pick and roll, get into the lane and kick out for shots. In Italy, there was a lot of throw it down to the big man, let him work in the post, kick it out of, the double team and find open shooters. And in France, the other place that I played, it was a lot of up and down. There was a lot of African players that were really athletic. And so there was a lot of lobs and fast breaks. So that's kind of the different game, a little bit slower in Italy, a little bit more dynamic in Spain, really up and down in France, and Israel was a lot of one-on-one.
Awesome. Thank you. That's from a player's standpoint, obviously. Jake, from a coach's standpoint, give us your input.
Yeah, so I was coming from college, right? So I was coming from Temple, and I'd spent 3 years there. So it was a totally different paradigm. You're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds at Temple, and in Israel, you're dealing with grown men. You're dealing with 23 to 37-year-olds. They've seen it all, done it all. So it's a totally different person, and that you're coaching, and the game is totally different. The first thing that stood out to me that was different was the point swings were like massive overseas. And David could probably attest to this more than I can in different countries. But what I observed was, you could be up 30, but you've never won the game, and you can be down 35 and you're never out of the game. And I'm thinking to myself, why is it like this? Because it happened almost every game, right? Maybe not 30 and 35, but there's always swings that seem like they are greater than college basketball or the domestic market. And I mean, the two things that I thought kind of lent itself to that were the emotional intensity of the Middle East. It's balagan, it's chaos, right? It's like organized chaos or just chaos. So, that trickles down to the basketball court and players as well. And then overseas or in Israel, there are no TV timeouts in terms of there's no 4-minute timeouts. Yes, there's quarters and they go to TV then, but, in college, you have timeouts at the 16-minute mark, the 12-minute mark, the 8-minute mark. So there's always a stoppage in play coming. But if teams are on runs in Israel, like they're going to keep staying on the run until they're done or the quarter's over. So that's why you have such huge swings. And the players are so good in comparison to college players that they can make plays. Everybody can make shots. So you're going to go on runs. So that was the thing that really was stuck out, first and foremost. And then just, the stuff that you would imagine, the language stuff was really interesting as a staff member, seeing how different coaches would communicate with the Israelis, and then the Americans, Hebrew for the Israelis generally, and then a mixed mash of Hebrew and English for the domestic guys. So that was interesting. And the same thing for the staff. I don't speak Hebrew. I don't know. I'm learning, but I'm not that great with it yet. So, it was a challenge for the first month or two trying to figure out, the learning curve of the game, and also, the learning curve of the culture. And to David's point, I think Israeli basketball, at least when I was there 2 years ago, every cut was for a score. In college, you set things up. There's different actions. It takes forever. In Israel, and I think probably in most European countries, like every cut is for a score, and then there's a counter to that and counter to that. So like, there's no wasted time. Like they're going at it straight away. And then the last thing I observed from the coaching side was you never do this in college. At least very few teams do. Like on misses, most every team would pick up three-quarter court, right? And that doesn't happen in college because the college kids, I don't think, generally have the discipline to do that, like on a missed shot, actually picking up on defense and picking up basically full court. So since the shot clock's 24 seconds in Israel, doing that would get, disallow teams from getting their offense. Maybe they might get in their offense with 16 seconds, so you burn 8 seconds. That's a big, significant thing. So, my first glance of experiencing this the first couple of months, those are the things that I saw, and it was definitely a learning curve.
Awesome. Very, very cool perspective from both y'all, from player and coach, and love hearing about Spain and Italy and the different styles. And I don't think anybody can expect, what we've seen the last couple of days with, a 7-footer for the Nuggets dominating as a point guard. And it's a totally European sort of thing happening in the NBA. And they're running all the action off of him and all the screens and handoffs. It's totally different. It's so fun to watch. If you're a Clippers fan or a Doc Rivers fan, I apologize. But David's already admitted that he was born and raised a Magic Johnson LA Laker
Oh yeah,
guy.
I'm a Laker guy. I'm a Laker guy.
He's a Laker
I'll tell
guy.
you what
Coach was here.
Yeah, one thing that I heard him say that they think that Jokic is the best center they've ever seen passing, around. And I'm thinking about Sabonis and Divac. The announcers never saw a guy named Nikola Vujicic that I played with, who was like the best passing center I've ever seen. So that was a fun comment.
Where was he?
He was with me at Maccabi. But Jake, to your point about the picking up full court, the thing about that is, like you said, those are grown men. So they have grown men strength in their legs. They're more developed than college kids. So they can do that. Their whole life is basketball. So, college kids, they have school, they have social life. These guys are pros. The other thing is, that was kind of the idea behind the strategy of, you have a lot of Israeli smaller guards, and their job is to pick up full court. Their job is not to score it. The American guys who come over there, or the foreign guys, their job is to score. So the small guards mentality, the Israeli small guards mentality is pick up full court, hit the point guard every time he's got the ball, and just make life difficult for him, which college kids aren't used to.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So a couple comments or questions for you guys are two things is, playing, going from college where it's the kids are young and they're athletic and they're learning the game, against playing against 23 to 37-year-olds, as Jake said, grown men who, if you make that cut, you're going to get popped. It's a very physical game. Can y'all speak a little bit to the physicality of the game in a professional level and in Europe, because it's notorious known that they don't blow the whistle?
David, go ahead.
David, how about you?
Okay, yeah. So I went to USC first of all, so I had a different experience because I got to battle against a big guy, Sam Clancy, every day. So I was able to play against another big body. When I got to the pros, they were definitely, as far as physically goes, I was physically strong enough, but I didn't have all the small details like when to pull a guy's shirt or when to bump a guy in a cut or where to, how to box him out. So as you get older in the game, you learn all these tricks to kind of help you play against guys and become a better player. So that was probably the biggest thing, was learning how to be aware when other people are going to, hit me, or when I need to do things like that, like kind of under the table type of action in the game. Nothing dirty, but certainly there are things that you learn as you go on. And then the size. But the thing is, I found it so much easier to be a pro than to be a college kid, because as a college student athlete, you have school and you have things that you have to do, and you have people. When you're out of college and you are a grown up and your whole day revolves around your practice, it makes you can spend more time in the gym and work on your craft. And so if you're serious, you can excel a lot faster as a pro than when in college, because you just have more time to get more shots up and just get in the weight room. So that being said, it's like, that's really the difference, is the time that the men put into taking care of themselves and building their bodies up to play every single day.
So interesting, David, because, you know, from the coaching standpoint, and again, I didn't have the career that you had, but what I observed with a lot of the younger players was that weren't as mature as you, they struggled with all that time throughout their day, right? Because like in college, as you know, everything's scheduled out. There's no time. You might have 30 minutes at the end of the day for yourself. So you've got 22 and 23-year-olds coming over there, and it's their first time. And I'm sure you saw that with some of your teammates. It's their first time. They practice 2 hours a day or maybe 3 hours a day, and the other 22 hours, like they're left to their own devices. So if you don't have discipline and you don't have structure, you can struggle. I think the veterans have it down to a T, most of them. That's why they're still veterans. But a lot of the young guys, or some of the young guys, they were challenged with that. Like they would stay up, especially the Americans, they stay up till 4 a.m. because, you know, their boys back home are up, and then they wake up at 1 p.m. and practices at 4, and they're totally off their sleep schedule, and they just have no discipline. And so they get in the game like 5 days later, and they do that all week. It's game time Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and they have no legs, and they have no focus, and they're like, well, what's going on? And it's no surprise why they don't, right? So that was a huge learning curve that I saw with some of the younger players. It wasn't only the Americans, it was the Israelis too. But I just think that comes with being a mature player and being a professional, right? The strength thing.
Yeah.
Did you have something?
No, go ahead.
The strength thing, you nailed it. I mean, college, I don't think college kids always know the nuances to holding and grabbing and going and stopping and coming off the screen. And so like, you know, again, it was just a dichotomy for me, because when I first got there, you're used to watching college kids try to do this, and you watch grizzled pros who've been in EuroLeague, been in the NBA Champions League, and they're having their way with people. And then some of them aren't even that athletically gifted. They just know the game so well. So that was like a joy to watch. It was awesome.
Yeah, you know, and that's a big part about it, is just understanding the angles too, right? Because over here it's a different game as far as angles and spacing on the floor. Some of the rules are different, and whereas in Europe there's a lot more, as you said, cutting with a purpose. And in fact, that was the case. Your secondary offense was always to score. It was never to just set up a play. It was always to score, and then you bring it back. And the discipline is part of that. So it was the ability to know, like you said, starts and stops. I always tell people that for me, when I first got over there, I had a decent first year. I spent a lot of time in the gym shooting, because I love shooting and I love playing and working out and stuff. But I didn't have the best year, because I was thinking about, man, I should be in the NBA. This is some bull. I'm as good as, Jason Capono and Matt Barnes, and I'm sitting here watching these guys in the NBA. And then my second year, when I went back over there, I said, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy living in Israel. And so I went to like restaurants, and I went to like museums, and I enjoyed the culture, and I started to sort of live my life in the present. And so I started to go to friends' houses for Shabbat and kind of make my life there. And then that translated to on the court, because I wasn't looking at like where I wanted to be. I was just, grateful for where I was, and I was continuing to work hard, and that helped me certainly that year. So some kids need to hear that. They, learn to enjoy where they are, especially if they're living in like
Tel Aviv,
Israel.
man.
I mean, it's fantastic.
Better
Tel Aviv. Yeah.
So on that note, I don't have a ton of players on. I do see a certain Cornell point guard who's played in many Maccabis, Pan Am, and Israel as well. A young man named Brian Knapp on here, who definitely, has the ability. What would you give advice to young players or coaches who aspire to represent play in Israel? How would they, besides just being talented, obviously as you were, David, or as Jake as a coach, what advice can you give, to get an opportunity to play over there? And how about, Jake, why don't you go first for coach for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important in terms of the mechanical career steps, find an agent that you trust and that you like, and doesn't have to be an Israeli agent. You can find an American. Generally, I'm sure David knows this, and probably the way his agent was set up was generally have an American on one side and an Israeli on the other. So find an agent there's 3 to 4 agents that have placed American Jews consistently over the past 10 years. A lot of the guys in this picture behind Brian and behind me use these agents. And it's no secret why, because they get players jobs. They're trustworthy. And quite honestly, Maccabi USA family trusts these people. So like, that's the first thing is sleuth those people out, do your research, figure out who can help you and who you can trust. In terms of playing and just being ready, like maturity wise, I think you need to just realize that it's going to be like you're going to be like a fish out of water. It's going to be very, very uncomfortable, both on the court and off the court for probably the first 4 to 5, 6 months. Like you're in a new culture, a new, you're most of the time you guys are away from home, really away from home for the first time. If you live in Tel Aviv, the grocery stores are sometimes challenging getting meat, like little things like parking, like it can be a mess. I gave you one little story about me, so it puts it in perspective. When I got to Israel and I was coaching for Nestiona, I thought it'd be cool to live in Tel Aviv, like right on the beach, right? That's the dream, right? So I lived in Tel Aviv on the beach, and I commuted to basically Rishon or Nestiona, which is about 20 minutes south of Tel Aviv. And that was cool for the first day. And then when we had doubles and you don't have a parking pass and you have the park in Reading terminal parking, which is like a half hour, 45-minute walk north of the city, and that you do that all day long, you realize that you're spending more than half of your day just like with, menial living things. So I think getting settled there. So I moved to Rishon is the short of the story. So I could just settle somewhere and just get to work in 5 minutes. And then drive to Tel Aviv on the weekends to hang out and go to the beach. But I think it's really important to settle as fast as you can once you get there, because everything's going to be new and you need to have some grounding when you get there.
Yeah, I definitely, first of all, getting there, right, as a player, that's you have to decide on, how bad do you want it, to even become a pro. But if you are that fortunate, definitely if you're talking about college kids, decide if you want to play as an Israeli or as an American. And if you want to play as an Israeli, you want to make Aliyah and play as an Israeli, make Aliyah, you have to be prepared that you may have to go to the army, so that's one thing that a young player, a Jewish player that would want to go and live there and play as an Israeli might have to consider, that he may have to go serve through basic training and then go through the process. That it depends on each person's situation, whether or not they would have to do that. As far as living, definitely, getting used to things like, the schedules of grocery stores, Friday, Shabbat, things are closed down, on all Saturday, but there are areas, and certainly in Rishon, there's a couple of American stores that I know about. All over, you can find, places to find things you love. But, if you want to live in Israel, you want to drive, you have to get used to the driving. It's horrible. Really bad drivers there. I think they lead the world in traffic accidents per capita. And so that's one thing you have to get used to. I'm from LA, so there's, you have to, adjust to the drivers over there. It's hot, but, depends on where you're from. But, I think what Jake said about the agent is definitely correct. You want to have someone there that you can talk to and kind of who's on your side and vouch for you. And then I think the real thing is mindset. So going over there with the mindset that, if you are going to go over there as a professional basketball player, that's it. Your job is not to go over there and like go to the beach. I mean, you could do that stuff, but mentality wise, you have to say, this is it. I'm going to spend hours in the gym and I'm going to shoot 500 shots a day. And then you have to go there and actually do that.
I love it, David. I love it.
That's great. Really cool insight. And I know Maccabi USA hosted a call a couple of weeks ago with regarding the book Aliyah to Aliyah, David, which you're featured and were interviewed for. It's a great book, just touching on the points that you're talking about. Especially I got into the food and the driving and it's mostly about, African Americans' experience moving over to Israel and how much they love the country, but they do talk about the challenges and the screaming Israelis at all times in the grocery stores, telling them how they need to shoot more with their left hand and et cetera. Before everybody got on tonight, we were having a little side conversation, and David was telling us, Steve asked him what one of his most memorable, experiences teams was, and David brought up the 2014 situation when I think he won the Euro championship.
Yeah, EuroLeague in Milan.
We tell us a little bit about that season, maybe, and you had some pretty famous coaches and some famous players who we're all going to recognize besides yourself, and I think that'd be a pretty cool story for everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it started off as kind of like I graduated, so I retired the year before. I went back to USC. I graduated in May of 2013, and I couldn't find a job in the basketball industry. So over that summer, so I was trying to be an agent that summer. That's when I was trying to be an agent. So I couldn't really do anything in that business. So about October in 2013 of October, I told my wife at the time, I said, I got to go back overseas and play and figure this out. So I went back over to Maccabi. When I got there, when I walked in the locker room, I said, hey guys, I think we're going to win the championship this year, and everybody kind of was like, you can't just come back and say that. I said, watch, I just have a good feeling. And so, David Blatt was the coach, and he was totally on board with that. He was like, positive all the way. And, the media, and there's outside forces that are trying to bring Maccabi down all the time. And, we as a group were just really tight knit together. And David Blatt was a great coach, very uplifting, very inspiring. He's a great psychologist. So he really knew how to treat each individual player. And then I was kind of his, guy in the locker room. That was I was the oldest guy on the team. I had championship experience. And so I knew the game. I knew how to, I knew a lot about energy. So I knew how to bring up the team. And I was a good player too. So I could make shots and play good defense and stuff like that. And so we had our ups and downs. We had our usual injuries and aches and pains in the middle of the season. Then we were on our way down and then at the right time. And then about 3/4 of the way through the season, all of our guys were healthy, and we kind of had that push into the off season that you want to have as a team. And then once we got into the off season, we were together. We were moving the ball. We had a real good chemistry. We understood the strengths of each other. We all knew our roles, and we really believed in each other. And I think that's really the key. Is you have to have the talent, but you have to know how to work with each other, and you have to buy into the system. In European professional basketball, it's all about the system, because they can just replace an American player anytime, because there's plenty of American players. So American players and other foreign players have to go over there and buy into the coach's system. And David Blatt came with a great system. He usually always does. And so, with a team that had a group of grown-ups, most of the guys I think were married or in relationships. So, there wasn't one or two guys that was going out. So most of the guys were settled. And so, they knew how to take care of themselves. And they wanted to win. And so then when we got to the playoffs, we played well. We played the playoff series, and I think it was against Panathinaikos. Wow. And then we got to the Final Four. So once we got to the Final Four in Madrid, we played against Cheska. That was really neat, because nobody thought we would win. We were the total underdogs. First of all, we had half the budget we were the smallest budget. So it was like, we had $22 million budget, and Cheska Moscow had a 50 million euro budget, and Real Madrid and Barcelona were these huge teams. So they had these huge budgets, and they had the bigger players physically. They had taller, heavier players. And so that was going to be a challenge for us. But we really had just a dynamic squad that was, we could run, we could play half court, we could switch everything on defense. So that made pick and rolls hard against us. That was our solution, was just switch everything. So, especially if I was playing the five, I could guard a point guard. So it kind of made things, and we would fly all over the place. That was the thing. So we beat Cheska Moscow, which was fantastic. It was a game that we were down, going to the fourth quarter. We came back. I stole the ball. I hit a shot. It was, then Tyrese hit a shot. It was great. And then we went on to the finals. It was against Real Madrid. Those teams. It was a really hard fought season. And we beat Madrid. They were a tough team. They were big. They had a bunch of NBA guys. But I think that we just, we really had a scrappiness about us. And I always say that players, well, I didn't say this. My coach, Henry Bibby, when I was in college, said that players play the way their coach coaches. And David Blatt was just a really focused coach. And he is a focused coach. And so we were always focused, and we always believed in him. And a great story about him was in the semifinal, when we were down going into the fourth quarter, our body language was down, our energy was down, and we were in the huddle, and he looked around, and he didn't give any strategy, he was just smiling, talking about how happy he was to be there. Because at that moment, we needed some uplifting. And that was his whole purpose, was the timeout, was just to uplift our energy and spirits. And then he said, go out there and enjoy yourself. And then it was like, all right, so then we just came together on the court, and then we just went on a big run and won that game. But I think that was the theme of that year, was togetherness and just really playing for each other and buying into Coach Black's system.
That's a great story. Wow. What an experience for you. Thank you. It's interesting that both of you on the call tonight, our panelists, are, not old school coaches at all, or, you guys both pride yourselves on mindfulness, unlocking performance through your athletes. David, you mentioned earlier, Jake, I noticed your passion, what you focused on. And is that something that you were able to do in Israel, or did you learn more about it in Israel while you were there? Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, so like my role, so it's kind of a flow through from the work I've been doing for a bunch of years at Temple. I was a mental performance resource / player development resource off the court. And so going to Israel, the reason I chose the team that I chose, quite honestly, was we had a gentleman's agreement. Like, look, we want you to come in and do the player development stuff and do the mental performance. So basically, I more or less oversaw the mental performance and player development programs that went on throughout our Nestiona team. The way I structured it was, we customized programs for 8 players throughout the season. And we would there were off-court sessions every week with guys, and we took like 3 tiers of players. So the first tier was the guys that basically are best players. Daquan Cook, who I'm sure you've heard of, played in the NBA, and some of the Israelis that were really important to the team were first because they were our best players. So we would take things that they were working on. Maybe some guys were in slumps, some guys had come back from injury, some guys were just struggling because they're young, and we had a pretty tough head coach, so he would get on guys. So we would structure programs around statistically improving their game on the court, and then we would tier 2 to tier 3. So after the first tier of guys improved, we were able to go to tier 2 and tier 3, which kind of to David's point a little while ago, he talked about energy, right? We were cultivating energy and clearing energetic blocks on an individual level so the players could get out of their own way and be at their best. And when they started rolling, the other players would see basically the alphas, like basically the first 2 guys to work with were the alphas of the team. And that was on purpose because the first 2 guys I worked with were like really young and they quit. And I'm like, oh, they're going to fire me and send me home, right? So I had to kind of retinker, and I went straight to the 2 leaders of the team. Are like, look, you're struggling in these areas. I can help you. Let's get in some work. And kudos to them because, I've been there 4 weeks. They're like, who is this guy, right? And they've seen it all, done it all. And they were doing meditation off the court. They were implementing stuff in the game in practice, and they began to turn the game around. And so when the other guys saw the alphas really started to outperform, the other guys jumped on board, and we got a lot of work done. So, so to answer your question, there was a structured program from the mental side and on-court player development side to really move the dial for each player. And I'm super grateful for Nestiona, and Daniel Rabitz was the GM there, and Yaniv Mizrahi was the owner, and they're like, come on in and do your thing. So it was a great experience. Wasn't always easy, but it was a lot of fun. So I learned a lot from that.
Jake, Daniel Rabitz was my Israeli agent.
Oh, really?
So that's cool. I love Daniel. Yeah, he's a great guy.
He's got me to Israel.
There you go. Great guy.
You must have been like just
starting. So we have a bunch of questions from the audience tonight. And then we actually have someone who's going through a family experience regarding his son. We had a background. 3 nights ago, we had a ex-coaches, basketball players get together, a Maccabi get together, and the topic came up of Israeli players, and Gary's son is currently playing over there. So I'm gonna, let him talk for a moment. In a couple minutes, but in the meantime, I got a couple questions that have come through. David, from our esteemed Ami Munson, Can you tell us about going to synagogues and doing clinics for young kids and giving back, like your experience at Sinai Temple in LA for a certain Rabbi Sherman?
Rabbi Sherman, yeah, a real basketball junkie. Great guy. I guess for me, as far as going to synagogues and being a part of the religion, I never, so my mom, when she was still alive, when I was growing up, we would go to synagogue and we would celebrate the holidays. When she passed away when I was 14, I kind of just dove into basketball and I sort of lost touch with the religious side. So I didn't really go to synagogues for religious reasons. My reconnection to my Jewishness was really when I moved to Israel. And so my experience being part of the Jewish community is more of a Israeli Jewishness, if you could say, like a cultural Israeli Jewish form. As far as doing clinics and stuff, I love doing that. I mean, I'm a basketball guy. I haven't played basketball in a while or coached, basketball in a while, but I absolutely love it. That's what I grew up doing. And, once this pandemic ends and people start to actually play basketball again, working with teens is probably for me the best age because, between 12 and 18, they're open to learning things. Whereas after 18, we know it all already once we get to college and we only listen to a select few people. But when you're 12 to 13, 14, it's kind of like you're just learning how to get your legs under you. You're learning how to do push-ups correctly. You're learning about calf raises. So that's when you're starting to learn how to build your body and you're more open to suggestions as to how to become a better all-around athlete because you feel like you're going through puberty and you feel like your hormones want you to kind of grow and get bigger and stronger and learn and compete more. So it's certainly that's the age that I love working with young people.
You were gracious enough actually at tryouts in 2017 in LA. You came out to Milking Academy and we asked you to say a few words to, there were 50 kids there, and I think 4 or 5 have ended up in making the squad. So 45 of them weren't even on the squad in the end. But you spoke to them lovely and gave them inspiration and motivation. And
all right,
that's my only time I've ever met you. I do appreciate that. Steve, is it possible to punt this over to Gary for a moment to talk a little bit about the Russian rule that was mentioned earlier? It's talked a lot about in that book, and David Blue mentioned it earlier. I don't know how. I'm not
Can you hear me?
Gary's open.
Can you hear me? Hey, everybody.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, no, thank you, Brian. So a couple of things. The Russian rule. So the Israeli Premier League, the top league in Israel, which is where Travis is playing. He's starting his 4th year this year. Played his first 4 years actually in Germany, and then spent the last 3 years in Israel and signed again this year. The Israeli league has huge, over the last few years, has put a really big focus on developing the Israeli-born players. And as a result, they have tried to institute some rules over the last few years that are detrimental to the U.S. Jews or any Jews that are non-Israeli born. The first thing they did last year was they changed the Russian rule. We used to have two players on the court. You only need one now. So they got away with 2 players, and it's only one. Which went into effect last year. And then this year, what they're trying to do for folks who are American Jews is to limit the number of American Jews that are on the roster. And so in the past, you could have more than 3. Now you can only have 3 American Jews or non-Israeli born Jews, so to speak, or non-Israeli born players that have citizenship. So you can go over, you can become a citizen, you can make aliyah, but the rule that they tried to implement this year is that if you weren't in the league as a non-Israeli born citizen, if you weren't in the league for 4 years, you were not counted as an Israeli. So while you were actually a citizen and you can vote, if you hadn't played in the league for 4 years, you did not count. That rule was pushed out this year because of COVID. So there was a lawsuit. Travis is part of the lawsuit. There's 14 other American Jews that filed a lawsuit to block that part of the rule. The other part of that rule that was instituted is that if you did sign a player who wasn't in the league for 4 years and you wanted to count them as an Israeli, you'd have to pay a significant fine per player. And so it was, somewhere in the vicinity of serious money. It's like 50 grand or 80 grand a year that the club would have to play if they signed a quote unquote non-Israeli born player. That also got pushed out this year as well. But what didn't get pushed out is this three American Jews rule. And so you have teams like Travis's now in the top league that they've signed 5, is non-Israeli born Jews, guys who've made Aliyah. One guy's been in Israel for 8 years as an Israeli, and they have 5 guys on their roster. If that rule goes through and they can't fight it, 2 of those guys are going to lose a roster spot. And all of this is geared towards, developing young Israeli-born players in the league. So that's the Russian rule. That's the Israeli rule that's going on right now. They are fighting to not allow that citizenship rule to go through. But like I said, that was pushed out to next year. We'll see what happens with the lawsuit. And we'll see what happens with the new Minister of Sport. Someone else asked a question about COVID. I can answer that because we're living through that right now. Israel was open. The players went over. Israel is closed to Americans. It was open to the players. Obviously, they started the league back up, and they went over. They had to quarantine for 2 weeks, meaning they could go from their apartment to the gym and back to their apartment. They had team personnel would deliver their food to them. They weren't allowed to go anywhere, and that opened up yesterday. And then tomorrow, I think it's going back into the entire country's being locked down, and they have they can go, I think, 500 meters from their apartment. And if they live in an area that's got a shop or got a grocery store or a barber or whatever, they can do it. But if they don't, then they're stuck and they can't leave more than just to go to the gym and back to their apartments.
Wow. Thank you. Very, very insightful, and please send Travis and everybody over there our best. I know it's tough times. I just heard about the lockdown this afternoon that was being replaced again. There's a question maybe Jake and David can help us with regarding, over here in America, the AAU scene and, the college scene is huge for these teenagers. We all knew Zion Williamson's name before he stepped foot at Duke, and there's 14-year-olds that we see on Instagram and have social media, thousands of followers. Is there that scene in Israel yet, because it's such a passion for hoops, whether there's high school or college level? And that'll lead us into talking about the NBA draft coming up shortly. Jake, why don't you take it first?
Yeah, it's a different dynamic, right? You don't have AAU, you have youth programs. Obviously, Jerusalem and Maccabi have the strongest youth programs in the country. That's where these young players, if you're in country, mature. And then, it's the U17s, U19s, U20s. And if you guys, I'm sure you and ladies have been following, I'm sure over the past couple of years, Israel won 2 U20s, which they've never done before in the history of the country over the past 2 or 3 years. One was in Germany and one was in Israel, in Tel Aviv, I believe. And on that team, you have Denny, who's about to get drafted number 5 in the NBA draft. And you also have Yam Madar, who is a sleeper in my opinion. He's like a Steph Curry. He's about 6'2". He's probably the best on-ball pressure point guard in Israel for sure, maybe in the draft. He's really, really good. Like, to put in perspective how good he is, I think he'd start on in any major conference in the country in college and do really well. So, even the past few years, they developed their players through the youth programs, and then obviously the international play is really kind of like, I think, takes the place of the AAU programs for exposure.
Yeah, I think for me, what I noticed over there was the level of physical fitness that high school kids were doing. So I look around and I see a lot of AAU. I don't see a lot of AAU players in the weight room working out with strength coaches. And I found that the younger kids over there, they have access to the professional strength coaches because they don't really have AAU as much as they have like junior teams. Like there's the professional team, and then there's like the 18 and under, 16 and under, 14 and under, and they're all represented by the professional team. And so the coaching trickles down from a professional level down to the youth level. And part of professional basketball is really focusing on physical conditioning and weight room activity. And the other thing is really fundamentals. What I've seen is that there's a lot of games in America. There's just a lot of 5-on-5. So teams, they never do like just 3-on-3 half court and 4-on-4 types of drills. And in Europe, they do spend a lot of time on situational practice rather than just kind of rolling the ball out and letting them go up and down and just using their talent to play the game. Those are what I saw as far as high school kids.
Very cool. Thank you for answering that. We have another question. Specifically for David. David, given your time dipping your toe in the agent waters, would you ever consider spearheading another team for the TBT summer tournament again? And was it a good experience?
That was a great experience. We represented Shard Zedek. And I had played the summer before that when I played for LA Unified, which we played well. But I don't know if I'd sponsor a team. I would coach a team. I'm not playing anymore. My knees are no longer capable of landing on my jumping. That's really what it comes down to. I just don't want to jump or run anymore. And so I wouldn't play, but I would certainly work with a team to, help them prepare for the tournament. Certainly understand sort of the dynamics of it. But at the end of the day, it's basketball. So, if a TBT team wanted me to work with them, I'd be happy to be a part of that.
Awesome. Thanks. So we have a question from Bill Knapp, which just happened to be Brian's father. Beyond Premier League, what are the other leagues in Israel? Jake, why don't you start with that?
Did you say beyond the Winter League?
But beyond the Premier League. So
there's a Division II. I forget the name. I'm sure somebody on the call knows the actual official name. But Division II it's pretty strong. It's a stronger Division II league if you're to compare it to like a European league. To give you an example of the talent there, when I was there, they had guys like they had 2 Americans per every team in Division II when I was there. That may or may not have changed, but you had players from like Cincinnati. There's a player from George Mason on the same team, from Memphis on another team. So you have strong imports on the Division II teams. It's not a slouch league. Like for instance, some of the guys from the team behind me, actually a couple of those guys had to start in actually the 3rd division, which is like comparable to maybe I don't know, big Division III over here, like a lower Division III level over here, in order to work themselves up to make Division II. So there's 3 leagues. I mean, actually, there's more than 3 leagues. You can play like 4, 5, 6, but that's like, it's 65-year-olds playing against each other. But really the main leagues in Israel are Super League, Maccabi Tel Aviv's league, and then Division II, and then Division III. So Grant Greenberg, if you can see here, he's in Division, that guy. He's in Division III. He averaged 25 a game last year. He should be in Division II, and at some point he should get a shot in Division I.
Yeah, I think, my perspective as far as that goes, Division II, you got some good players because a lot of the Americans, they don't want to go, they may not even want to go play on a low Division I in Italy or another country because they want to go live in Israel. Israel is probably one of the best places to play for Americans. And so sometimes they would forego, living in a smaller town in Italy or France because they want to live in Israel. They want to experience Tel Aviv and go out and enjoy sort of the life there because Israel is such a close ally with America. Everything's in English. And so it's really comfortable living there. Speaking of the lower divisions, my last time I was there, a guy named Duran Sheffer, he was still playing in Division IV. I remember he came and he says he just loves playing. And, I think all these countries, you can just keep going down. it's amazing how big basketball is and how big the markets are around the world, how many pro leagues there are, and then filter that on down through the youth teams.
Thank you. Great answer to both of those regarding the different levels. Jake touched on Denny, the top 5 pick, who's coming. In this picture right here, this is Coach Fisher and Coach Klein, who are both on the call, and myself. The team we coached in the gold medal game, we ended up playing not a U18 team because the U18 team had to play, I believe, Jake's team, because the U20 team had been sent to Europe to play in a tournament. So we ended up playing the U16 team, and a young man named Denny Vidal was on the team, about 15-year-old kid who 6'3" and fairly thin. And fast forward now 3 years, and he is I actually just met him 2 weeks ago again. He's training here in Atlanta for the NBA draft. He's 6'9" and 3/4, can shoot it effortlessly from 40 feet, and is going to be a huge addition to an NBA squad and the highest draft pick ever for an NBA player. It was Maccabi Tel Aviv, most valuable player this past year, et cetera. And then, as Jake said, we have another draft pick as well coming in later in the draft, hopefully. As we're wrapping up, it's approaching 9 o'clock. David and Jake, again, we thank you. Sorry Annette cannot join us to hear her perspective from playing in Lafayette College and playing professionally, female side of hoops. I know that would have added a lot to the program, but we do appreciate all of your time. Any closing thoughts, Jake?
Well, first of all, I'm really grateful to be here and share a little bit about my experience. It was life-changing, literally. Maccabi USA is, I'm not saying this lightly, it's like family to me. So it means a lot to be able to share. But yeah, I really appreciate David and you, Brian, and Steve, and Shane and everybody else. It's cool to get back together for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here and be a part of this Maccabi family. You know, for me, after my junior year of high school, I was one of the best players, and I really wanted to go to Nike or ABCD All-American camp. I really wanted to go to one of those 2 camps, and I was invited to both of them, and I could have got like a big bag of gear and shoes and stuff and been an All-American. And my dad said, no, you're going to go to Israel and play in the Maccabi games. And I'm like, I don't want to go play in the Maccabi games. No, you know, what's that? That's the Jewish Olympics. I want to go to Nike All-American camp. But I went to the games, and it was more than just like basketball. It was the connection to the country. It was having the opportunity to represent my country and then connect with Israel. And it was such a great experience, and I'm so happy I did. And so happy to be a part of that and be able to share my stories about the times with Maccabi USA.
David, I do have one question. You mentioned that you went to USC because UCLA wanted another player. Who was that player?
Yeah, Jaron Rush. So they wanted a guy named Jaron Rush who signed. He played there his first year, and that was it. He had some off-the-court issues, and that was it.
Their loss.
And Henry Bibby said that if I went there, we would have the best team in USC history and we could start something. And he told me the players that were going to come. So it was pretty compelling.
Did you play with Baby Jordan?
Nah, he was before me.
He's before you. Great. Got everyone on this call. We appreciate David and Jake's feedback. Really cool stories. They've had amazing experiences. We hope both of you, I know Jake's already involved in 22 as co-chair with Josh of the Open team. David, we need to see you involved. If your knees can't have you play, we need you involved as a mentor or coach.
Sure.
When we have tryouts from both coasts. Right now, the only coach that has been named is John Shire of Duke, the associate head coach who also played for Maccabi Tel Aviv after he left Duke. We are thrilled with that, and the masters coaches, the youth, junior coaches were internally named, but we never did press releases, and we are not going to be doing those probably until next spring again, just to make sure that those folks still want to do it out of respect for them. We will be having tryouts next summer, all around the country, June, July, and August, East Coast and West Coast as always. So we hope that, spread the word, keep in touch with the email, send us names of players, and send us names of coaches. We have 4 or 5 head coaches on this call tonight that have been involved or we want to get involved as well. And we have a lot of ex-coaches as well. So this has just been an amazing turnout, close to 50 of us tonight. Very, very excited about it. Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year, most of all. Definitely been the most interesting year any of us can remember. And hopefully our last pandemic that we will be going through together.